In 1453, the map of the Eastern Mediterranean showed a stark imbalance of power. The Ottoman Empire had expanded across the Balkans and Anatolia, leaving the Byzantine Empire entirely encircled and reduced to the single city of Constantinople. Mehmed II took the throne at 21, facing immediate pressure to prove his legitimacy. His rivals in the region viewed his dynasty as a collection of upstarts with questionable lineage. By seizing this specific geography, the land bridge between Europe and Asia, he would secure his authority over his internal and external critics. Success required overcoming a defensive record that had stood for over 1,000 years. Constantinople survived dozens of sieges because its natural and man-made defenses were designed to be insurmountable. These are the Theodosian walls, a massive system of layered stone and brick that had never been breached by a land army. To any general in 1453, they represented the most formidable physical obstacle in the known world. Mehmed recognized that traditional siege tactics would fail against these fortifications. He looked past standard warfare, choosing instead to develop a specialized engineering strategy tailored to the city's unique defensive systems. His first move was diplomatic. Mehmed used a period of strategic silence to secure his flanks, signing peace treaties with Hungary and other Balkan powers. These agreements ensured that European reinforcements would be delayed or blocked when the assault began. He then moved to isolate the city from the sea. In just 4 months, his engineers built the Rumeli Hisari fortress at the narrowest point of the Bosphorus Strait. This allowed his cannons to sink vessels attempting to bring supplies from the Black Sea. To address the land walls, Mehmed commissioned the engineer Orban to cast a bronze bombard of a scale the city had never encountered. It was a massive piece of artillery that fired stone projectiles weighing over 600 pounds. The bombardment began on April 6th. For weeks, the city's walls were subjected to a constant rhythm of heavy impact, with stone boulders shattering the ancient masonry. Despite the damage, the defenders held. Emperor Constantine XI led a force of barely 7,000 men who spent their nights clearing rubble and filling breaches with earth and timber, managing to keep the perimeter intact through sheer manual labor. The technology of the Ottomans was meeting the endurance of the Byzantines. While the walls were crumbling, they were not yet broken, forcing Mehmed to find a way to strike from a different direction. The city's northern side was protected by the Golden Horn, a harbor blocked by this massive iron chain. The links were so heavy and the defense so established that the Ottoman fleet could not force its way into the inner harbor. Mehmed solved this by moving his navy over land. His soldiers used greased wooden logs to drag 70 ships across the hills of Galata, bypassing the chain entirely and launching them directly into the city's inner harbor. Below the ground, a different battle took place. Ottoman sappers attempted to tunnel under the walls, but Byzantine counterminers intercepted them. In the pitch darkness of these tunnels, soldiers fought with shovels and daggers until the supports were burned and the earth collapsed on both sides. Inside Constantinople, the pressure became unbearable. With Ottoman ships now in the harbor and the walls failing under ground-level attacks, the population faced dwindling supplies and omens of defeat, including a lunar eclipse that many saw as a sign of the end. By forcing the defenders to man the harbor walls as well as the land walls, Mehmed had stretched the city's limited garrison to the breaking point. On the morning of May 29th, the final assault began. Mehmed deployed his forces in waves. First, the irregular infantry to exhaust the defenders, then the disciplined provincial troops, and finally his elite janissaries. The defense finally cracked due to a small oversight at the Kerko Portigate. Left partially unsecured during the chaos, it allowed a small group of janissaries to enter and attack the defenders from behind. A soldier named Ulubatli Hassan was among the first to scale the outer wall. Despite being struck multiple times by arrows, he reached the summit and planted the Ottoman banner before he fell, providing a visible signal of the breach to the rest of the army. The sight of the flag triggered a surge of renewed energy throughout the Ottoman lines. Seeing the high ground taken, the main force flooded through the gaps in the wall and overran the city's last defenses. The fall of the empire was the direct result of overwhelming pressure, a single unsecured gate, and the momentum of an army that saw the city as its inevitable destination. Upon entering the city, Mehmed ordered an end to the destruction of major landmarks. He rode to the Hagia Sophia and performed a prayer of gratitude, signaling the transition of the city from a Christian capital to an Islamic one. By accomplishing what centuries of predecessors had failed to do, he transitioned from a contested heir to the sovereign ruler of a rising empire, finally claiming the historic title of Fatih, the Conqueror. By taking Constantinople, Mehmed secured the crossroads of the world and established a superpower that would dominate the region for the next 5 centuries. For over 1,000 years, the fortifications of Constantinople held firm. Arab fleets, Seljuk cavalry, and previous Ottoman sultans all retreated from these walls, unable to find a way through the city's ancient defenses. Frontal assaults were met with failure. The scale of the defenses meant that for 10 centuries, traditional siege tactics were simply insufficient. In 1451, the Ottoman throne passed to Mehmed II. At 21 years old, he rejected the brute force methods of his predecessors, choosing instead to treat the city as a logistical problem to be solved through planning and technology. The geography of the city defined the difficulty. Water protected 3 sides of the peninsula, with a massive iron chain blocking entry to the Golden Horn Harbor. On the landward side, the multi-layered Theodosian walls blocked the only path for an army. Because the city could be resupplied by sea and defended by a small force on land, a standard siege was a mathematical impossibility. Success required a strategy that could neutralize these specific geographic advantages. Mehmed began by ensuring that the city would receive no help from the outside world. He spent his first years in power signing treaties and sending peace signals to Hungary and the Balkans. This diplomatic silence ensured that when he moved on the city, Western relief armies remained stationary. With the land routes neutralized, he turned to the sea. To starve the city, he had to control the flow of grain and trade through the Bosphorus. In just 4 months, he constructed the Rumeli Hisari fortress at the strait's narrowest point. This gave his cannons direct oversight of the waterway, establishing total maritime dominance and cutting off the city's northern supply line. By the time the siege began, the defensive force under Emperor Constantine XI had dwindled to barely 7,000 men. They were now isolated and facing an Ottoman army of over 80,000. Before the first shot was fired, the city's resources were already depleted. Victory was being built on the systematic removal of the enemy's options. To address the physical barrier of the land walls, Mehmed turned to a technology the Byzantines could no longer afford to ignore: the bombard. A bombard is a heavy, large-caliber cannon designed to hurl stone projectiles with enough force to shatter masonry. He commissioned Orban, a Hungarian engineer, to build artillery on a scale never seen before. While the Byzantine treasury was too empty to pay Orban's fees, Mehmed provided the engineer with every resource he requested. The sheer logistics of this operation were staggering. These cast bronze weapons were so heavy they required hundreds of oxen and thousands of men just to transport them from the foundries to the city walls. Once in position, the cannons began a relentless, weeks-long bombardment. They focused their fire on the same sections of the Theodosian walls, day and night. The ancient stone, which had survived 1,000 years of traditional warfare, began to crumble under the impact of half-ton stone boulders. This sustained barrage signaled the end of the medieval era. Heavy masonry, once the gold standard of defense, could not withstand the evolution of gunpowder. Despite the damage to the land walls, the city held. The Byzantine navy, protected by the iron chain across the Golden Horn, kept the harbor safe. Traditional naval attacks against the chain had failed, hampered by unfavorable winds and the devastating use of Greek fire by the defenders. Mehmed bypassed the water entirely. Engineers built a greased log road over the rugged terrain of Galata. Overnight, soldiers hauled a fleet of war galleys out of the Bosphorus, over the hills, and directly into the Golden Horn. When the sun rose, the defenders found a hostile fleet inside their inner harbor. The maneuver forced the Byzantines to pull men away from the land walls to defend the sea-facing ramparts, thinning their already exhausted lines. On May 29, 1453, Mehmed launched the final push, using staggered waves of infantry to systematically exhaust the remaining defenders. He first sent in thousands of irregular troops to absorb the defenders' ammunition and energy. They were followed immediately by disciplined Anatolian infantry, who pressed into the breaches made by the cannons. Only when the Byzantine lines were at the point of collapse did Mehmed deploy his final reserve, the Janissaries. These elite, heavily armored soldiers struck the final, decisive blow against an enemy that had no strength left to resist. A soldier named Ulubatli Hassan fought his way to the top of the ramparts. Though he was struck down, he successfully planted the Ottoman flag on the wall, signaling the end of the Byzantine defense. The success of the elite Janissaries was built on the exhaustion of the defenders. The final strike was effective only because of the calculated pressure applied by the waves that came before. On the morning of May 29th, the city fell. The death of Constantine XI marked the end of the Roman line, and Mehmed assumed the title of the Conqueror. Rather than destroying the city, Mehmed moved to preserve it. He protected key structures and encouraged its citizens to stay, transforming the city into the new capital of the Ottoman Empire. The fall of the city triggered a massive migration. Byzantine scholars fled to Italy and Western Europe, carrying with them ancient Greek manuscripts and classical texts that had been preserved in Constantinople for centuries. This influx of knowledge provided the intellectual foundation for the European Renaissance. The city was rebuilt as Istanbul, the heart of an empire that would eventually stretch across 3 continents and govern the crossroads of the world for nearly 500 years. This transition was not the result of a single lucky break. It was the outcome of a strategy that identified every geographic and military advantage the city possessed and systematically dismantled them, one piece at a time.